Hello and welcome. My name is Alexander Kerry. You're watching Head to Head on UATV. While Russian President Vladimir Putin officially took office for his fourth term and 6 more years in the Kremlin, the opposition took the street to protest against his autocratic regime. What should Ukraine expect from such developments? For an overview of this situation, joining us in the studio is Anton Korynevych, international legislation expert. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Alexander.
So first, Russian President Vladimir Putin officially took office on May 7th. How do you see this mandate unfold for Ukraine?
Well, first of all, it's no surprise that Vladimir Putin is again the president of the Russian Federation. So Ukraine, I'm sure, is ready to face the problems and issues which will arise both in political aspects and in legal aspects with the new presidency of Vladimir Putin, because it is, I think, obvious for all of us that the trend of Russian policy and the trend of Russian aggression against Ukraine and occupation of parts of Ukrainian territory will remain the same. On the other hand, of course, I think that the violations of human rights which happened before the inauguration day during the protests in different cities and towns in the Russian Federation, violation of freedom of peaceful assembly and rights to protest peacefully, I think they are really appalling, and I think that the Russian Federation again has told all the world that there is no stops and no limits for the Russian Federation when we talk about violations of international law and human rights law.
Now that's interesting that you raised this topic, because what are the means of international community to apply this law in Russia, in the Russian Federation?
Well, actually, not so many of them, but I think that one of them is, of course, European Convention of Human Rights and European Court of Human Rights. And taking into account that there are rather a lot of people against whom these violations were committed, I think that some of them will go to national courts in Russia, and when these courts will not satisfy their ideas, they will go to the European Court of Human Rights, and then there may be some decisions against Russian Federation, and then it may be a very interesting issue, because we know that Russian Federation several years ago took a decision by the Constitutional Court that the Russian Federation may not implement the decision of the European Court of Human Rights when it is against the Russian interests and against the Constitution of the Russian Federation. So this may bring a really interesting legal precedent what to do when there is a decision of the European Court of Human Rights, and this decision is against Russian interests, whether the Russian Federation will implement it. But of course, if this happens, it happens in several years.
So it's a sort of a test, but it will take time anyways too.
It can be an interesting precedent really for international law in general and for human rights situation in the Russian Federation.
Now, speaking about violation of human rights, let's speak about Crimea. Recently, there has been, so since the end of April, Russian border guards have been inspecting vessels going through the Black Sea and questioning their crew without explaining the reason. First of all, in whose water do Russian border guards conduct their inspection? Is it in international waters? Is it like how?
Well, the motives of such actions of the Russian border guards are the so-called safety of the construction of the so-called Crimean bridge. But of course, we must always remember that all the issues which relate to construction of the so-called Crimean bridge is against international law. And all the issues which relate to Crimean Peninsula and to Kerch Strait shall be discussed with Ukraine, as Ukraine is the sovereign of Crimean Peninsula and of internal waters of territorial sea near the Crimean Peninsula. So all these actions are totally in breach of international law, of international maritime law, of international United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And of course, this may be threatening for Ukraine, because we know that some port cities are situated in the Sea of Azov, like Mariupol and Berdyansk. And let's hope that these actions of the Russian Federation border guards will not result in not letting ships to Ukrainian ports. But of course, these actions are totally illegal, as far as also the arrest of Ukrainian small ships which are doing their job in the sea near Crimea.
So, we're going to continue on Crimea, but recently. Yes, my question would be, if we're talking about maritime law here, whose So for Russia, it's European Court of Justice. Is it still the European Court of Justice who's taking care of this problem with this international law, or is it like another court, another?
I think that here we should talk that there are a lot of international fora, so some international jurisdictions, international courts, where the issues which have like connection with the law of the sea and Crimean situation may be discussed. And the main is, of course, United Nations Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, where Ukraine has already made an application against the Russian Federation regarding several issues on Crimean aspects. So, of course, such aspects as a breach and the construction of breach and the possible developments, for instance, ecological threats, and also these issues. So I think they are mainly the target for the United Nations International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. And Ukraine also applied to several other tribunals, for instance, International Court of Justice, for instance, European Court of Human Rights. For instance, also International Criminal Court is now looking at the situation in Ukraine. But in particular, all issues which arise regarding the law of the sea and Crimea, when we talk about the sea, they shall go obviously to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea.
So do you think that multiplying that kind of actions through European Court of Justice, through this tribunal, UN tribunal, do you think it will really help Ukraine to fight legally against Russia by multiplying this instead of just focusing on one case?
Well, I think this is a normal activity by Ukrainian authority, and I think that I'm in favor of this activity because we see that aggression of Russian Federation in Crimea, in Donbass, it gave rise to a lot of issues, to occupation, to ecological threats, to war crimes, to terrorist actions. And there certainly is not the only one, the sole organ now in international law which can face these issues. So that is why when we talk about human rights abuses, we go to the European Court of Human Rights. When we talk about responsibility of the state in general, we go to International Court of Justice. When we talk about law of the sea, this is Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. When we talk about possible alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian officials, we go to the International Criminal Court. So this is quite a normal situation for international law.
Now you spoke about the UN recently, so since the 1st of May, Poland is now the head of the UN Security Council. What will it change for Ukraine? Because, well, the relation between Poland and Ukraine are a bit sensitive, of course, but will it help Ukraine? Will it not help Ukraine against Russia? How will it change is it going to be a game changer, and how will it?
Well, first of all, yes, for the public, for the audience, it might seem that the relations between Poland and Ukraine are a bit sensitive politically, but still we understand, and Poland also understands, that we are strategic partners, mainly and in particular on the international arena. So on the international arena, I think that nothing will threaten the good, friendly relations and strategic partnership between our two countries. Ukraine was a member of the UN Security Council for 2 years. It ceased being a member in the end of 2017. So I think that by Polish heading of the United Nations Security Council, this is a good issue and a good moment for Ukraine to resemble interest to the situation in Ukraine. So that though Ukraine is not a member of Security Council now, it ceased this membership, but still the situation in Ukraine will be paid much attention in the Security Council, because the Security Council is headed by our strategic partners. So I think that this is a good moment, though it will not change something a lot. Personally, I think so, but it will the interest to Ukraine, to Crimea, to Donbass will remain in the Security Council.
So it would still be a way to give a voice to Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not at the Council, thanks to Poland.
Exactly, either a vote to Ukraine or either the vote to other countries who will talk in the Ukraine interests, not because they like Ukraine so much, but because Ukraine is a target to aggression, and international community shall answer this aggression for sure.
Well, thank you for joining us in our studio for today. It was this really interesting overview.
Thank you.
That was Anton Korynevych, he's an international legislation expert. Thank you for watching us. Stay tuned for the rest.